Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are here for Victory Road's World Cup of VGC, sponsored, in fact, by El Gato. And my name's Ben Kiriakou, joined here by David Partington. And we have just had a showdown between two restricteds that one doesn't match up quite so well against the other, but Zacian managed to knock out a Groudon from contention here with Chile versus Brazil, and what a phenomenal match to be a part of. David, did you manage to catch any of the action?
Yeah, I did, and it was an excellent match as well. Didn't expect it to go to game three either. It was a big change around, and like the safety goggles reveal as well. Blocking that Venusaur was very nice to see as well. Like just shutting down Steep Powder, which is something I think is very healthy.
Definitely is. And without further ado, of course, we have another very exciting match. And we just had a little bit of a preview of those teams that you'll have seen just before we went live here as well. We have, of course, Italy versus Indonesia here. And Italy, one of the strongest teams really in VGC at the moment, such a depth of players and such a high caliber of players, both in team building and, of course, in their ability to convert that team building to tournament wins. Against Indonesia, which we haven't seen too much of separately, but, of course, like every other team here, they've managed to make it through the first stage, the qualifier stage of the tournament, make it out of their group into the second stage of the tournament, and now are facing down Italy and bringing definitely some of their creativity with it.
Absolutely. And Indonesia were the top of their group in the qualifiers, beating both Hong Kong and Paraguay. And Hong Kong have also made it through as well, as we will be seeing later on in our stream today. Whereas Italy don't need any introduction. They've done very well, not only in World Cup, but in lots of previous tournaments as well. However, they have lost to Spain in their qualifiers. So having beaten Uruguay and Norway, they have still made it through, but nonetheless, a very formidable team to be going up against.
Definitely so, definitely so. And of course, Italy being the winners as well of the Euro Cup held just recently and hosted by Victory Road, of course. We can see on the board right now there are no games that have been posted just yet, so we have the pleasure of casting the first match between these two teams, Italy and Indonesia. So without any more to say on that front, let's get into the player previews here. Starting off with Italy and Francesco here, sporting the Xerneas, Rillaboom Incineroar, Urshifu, Rapid Strike, Amoonguss, and that Volcarona.
It does, yeah. And interestingly, this is the third time Francesco has been brought the Amoonguss into his set. I think in week one versus Uruguay, he won his set using Lunala with some Amoonguss and some Stack Attacker, lots of Trick Room stuff going on. And in week two, he did lose versus Spain's Ramses Quintana using a Zacian team, but also with that Amoonguss. But this time, again with the Amoonguss, but this time with Xerneas, the classic combination of the Amoonguss plus the Xerneas, Rage Powder, Spore support, you name it. So it's looking very threatening. As maybe a more standard 6, that's for sure, but still very threatening, especially with those accomplishments there. The top 8 of the VR Circuit Spring Grand Finale, top 8 in the Players Cup, 3 Global Finals. There's nothing to shake a stick at here. Francesco is quite the opponent.
Certainly is. And of course, facing down Francesco, we will have Indonesia's player Nicholas, who will be sporting a team that I'm really excited to see, that Kyurem White Aurorus Heatran, a Pokemon that we don't see too often, certainly in VGC these days, along with Aurorus, of course, Zapdos, Rillaboom, and Suicune.
We do. And now Nicholas for Indonesia, he's only played one game, and that was versus their Hong Kong, their opponents in the qualifiers in their week 2. He won their set and bringing a Groudon, Volcarona, Rillaboom, Lecky, Suicune, and Stack Attacker team. So this is very much the switch up here. Suicune's probably the only thing, or maybe the Rillaboom that's the same, but yeah, a Hail combination going up here and an Aurorus, which I've seen probably none of on stream ever. So very excited for this match.
Yeah, hopefully it's one of those games where the Pokemon that's really interesting also comes to the match. And now going into team preview, we have these two restricted Pokemon, Xerneas versus Kyurem White of sorts. David, how do you think these two restricteds are going to match up alongside the Pokemon that they're brought with?
Well, on Nicholas' ends, from his perspective, I think if you're running Kyurem White, you are definitely going to have other answers for Xerneas, because that's definitely something you don't want to go up against. You're a special attacker as well, so you're not hitting it as hard, especially when Xerneas is boosted up, so you want those other answers. And that I can see as well. Heatran is one of the best resistant to Fairy out there. Fortunately, does not get Raw anymore, but Suicune is very bulky and does get that as well, possibly with the Snarl too. So I'm starting to see some ways you can get around it. But interestingly, this Aurorus also has quite a good matchup. It hits, or even if it had Freeze Dry as well, it hits 5 of the 6 of Francesco's team for super effective damage. So it could be interesting to see that come out here. But it's definitely going to be about denying Xerneas that Geomancy, it seems. Because I think once that Xerneas is boosted, it's going to be hitting very hard, and Heatran, which is probably the only thing that resists it, can't really hit it that hard back unless it is physical, potentially. But let's get into this set between these two. I'm hoping to see some Hail, and we're probably going to see a lot of Xerneas.
Yeah, I really hope that Aurorus comes to the match. And we did see a Kyurem White on stream before, sporting that age-old tactic of beating Xerneas by switching in and getting knocked out. So maybe a little bit of that going on, but we see the leads here coming out on your screen. Francesco leading out with that Incineroar, and the Urshifu is that Rapid Strike variant. And of course, on Nicholas's side of the field, you have that Rillaboom and Suicune.
We do. So neither opponent leading with their restrictors here, which makes some sense. It's definitely something you want to kind of set up or create a safe space to bring in and dish out a lot of damage. And Nicholas has brought out his Suicune here, so he is able to get a lot of speed control going with the Tailwind or the Icy Wind, especially versus this lead, which is not going to be doing too much to it. Unless we see, say, a Taunt on this Incineroar and also outspeeds the Suicune, which would be quite something to see. But Rillaboom is able to safely help Suicune set that up. I wouldn't be surprised to see a U-turn potentially here, because although Incineroar's fake out target is only the Rillaboom at this point, but I think both opponents would probably benefit from going with some pivoting action here. Neither are going to be threatened by huge one-hit KOs, so it'd be about how these players respond to each other's setup of a nice position.
Responding with a switch out straight off the bat from that Urshifu, bringing the Rillaboom in, and a fake out coming out from Nicholas's Rillaboom into the Incineroar. So no fake out, no Flare Blitz, certainly no Taunt coming out on there. And Suicune is going to be able to set up the Tailwind, probably not too much of a benefit just yet, but maybe in a couple of turns we'll see the fruits of its labor.
Exactly. So we're seeing the age-old core of the Fire, Water, Grass really getting pivoted out, turning around. So we've got Fire and Grass versus Grass and Water at the moment. So it's definitely looking... It's hard to say whose favorite is at the moment, because these are all such bulky Pokemon that are really good at kind of pivoting, setting up, covering each other's bases, supporting with Fake Out. It's about like how you use that Fire, Water, Grass core to set up your restricted and get it into the best position, which is really interesting. And we are seeing it now.
Yeah, certainly that Heatran switching in. We're getting the Fire in place of the Water. We're getting the Grass type now switching out with a U-turn, doing pretty good damage to Francesco's Rillaboom, so might be significant later on in the match, and going to be able to pivot back in that Water type Suicune. We'll have to see how the Incineroar decided to act on Francesco's side of the field. If it does launch out Fire type into that Heatran, not going to do any damage whatsoever. We see a little bit more pivoting action, U-turn from the Rillaboom coming out, and of course, Rillaboom, Incineroar are both Pokemon known for doing lots and lots of pivoting, certainly in this format. A nice combination of Pokemon that can just bring in and out fake out and bring that Intimidate in, use the grassy terrain to keep themselves just that little bit more healthy than what they would be potentially otherwise. Just that water type Urshifu coming in for the Rillaboom, and now a little bit more pivoting as the Incineroar comes out, does lower the special attack and attack of the Heatran on Nicholas's side of the field, and Francesco's going to just be able to get his own Rillaboom back in and continue to threaten down that Suicune with powerful grass type attacks in this grassy terrain.
Yeah, and finally we see the reveal of a little bit of speed interaction there. The Suicune going first, but there is the Tailwind up on that side, so it's not too surprising to see that. So Francesco's obviously playing for his Xerneas endgame here, and there's two things that you don't want to be facing if you're the Xerneas trying to boost up with Geomancy, and that's maybe a roll from Suicune and just being in front of a Heatran, which you can't do too much to either. So he's pivoting nicely in a lot of answers to these two threats. So he's got his Urshifu in position, he's got his Rillaboom in position, so it's a really nice slot to just kind of Surging Strikes and Grass type attack the Suicune. Obviously, Nicholas can respond to this, but it's still a really nice position to be in, especially if Surging Strikes does ignore Protect. You can kind of start targeting slots and start dishing out damage this turn, rather as the last two turns we've said. It's just mainly been positioning. But meanwhile, Nicholas's Tailwind is getting, well, delayed quite a bit.
It certainly is, and that's one of the disadvantages to Tailwind coming out so early when you're pivoting. Does mean that you pivot first before your opponent gets to pivot. We just see some switches though here. Heatran switching out for the Rillaboom, trying to maybe take some water type attacks from that Urshifu, attack into it with some grassy glides of its own, and of course Rillaboom on Francesco's side of the field does bring in that Incineroar, catches the Rillaboom just as it switched in with that Intimidate, as well as a close combat, doing a big chunk of damage, and Suicune finishing off the turn with that Scald onto the Incineroar, going to reveal a Citrus Berry on that Incineroar, so good item reveal there for Nicholas, and Scald not now, because of that grassy terrain recovery and that Citrus Berry, gonna be enough to pick up the KO, but yeah, I think Francesco's just keeping on the right end of this pivoting game.
I think he is, yeah. As you can see, he's still got his Pokemon very healthy at the moment. And a nice call to go for the close combat as well. It's pretty safe into a Heatran slot, and anything coming in is going to take a lot of damage, unless it's that Zapdos, which is probably not something that you're going to bring to most games, really. So an excellent target there, and Rillaboom has taken a huge chunk. And again, the Suicune can go for the Scald into what was the Rillaboom, which showing it's quite a nice water coverage move to have, actually, that stuff like Urshifu or other water types aren't often carrying at the moment, with such as Tapu Fini as well. So you are able to, even into a resisted hit, potentially burn it, which helps you out so much.
Certainly is, as Suicune just going to try and help its partner as Fake Out comes in from that Incineroar into the Rillaboom, so no action for Nicholas in this turn, and certainly Francesco really just happy to launch another close combat into the Rillaboom. You even knock out the Rillaboom, catch the Heatran on the switch in, and if we talk about what Pokemon are in the back, it's either the Aurorus or the Kyurem White or the Zapdos, but as you just mentioned, Zapdos not a likely Pokemon that you take to this matchup, so really nice safe play there from Francesco, just managing to put out one of Nicholas's Pokemon and really put an end to all of that pivoting action, as Kyurem lands on the field and probably doesn't like where it's what it's facing down right now.
No, I don't think so. But Kyurem coming in now is still a little bit tricky, because I think Nicholas may have realized by now that the Urshifu is Choice Scarf on Francesco's end, based on it outspeeding a few things, even despite Nicholas's Tailwind being up. So, and close combat is still very strong, despite, even if this Kyurem was max speed, this Urshifu is still going to outspeed as well. But actually, we do see a very interesting interaction here, Ben. Freeze Dry.
Yeah, Freeze Dry, just straight up knocking out the Urshifu there. Scald going into the Incineroar, following up with a good amount of damage. And we're just going to see that Incineroar go for the parting shot into the Suicune, though. So Francesco targeting that, maybe expecting the Kyurem to be going down this turn. Just targeting the Suicune, making sure it's not doing as much damage. But it managed to do all of the damage that it needed to, and here we are. One restricted enters the field one turn. The next turn, restricted enters the field from Francesco's side of the field, and yeah, now you've got to be a little bit worried if you are Nicholas, because that Xerneas is looking pretty nice right now.
It is, and you're about to also bring in a Pokemon with Fake Out, so you are even safer to set up what you want at the moment. If it's Rillaboom coming in here, you're able to cover the Suicune with the Grassy Glide, as that obviously can't be faked out if it's got that inner focus. You can cover it and go for it, as long as you can then live the hit from the Suicune, which I'd say you probably do if you're Xerneas. It's a very strong Pokemon, but it's not going to be one-shotting you at this point unless it's got something like Flash Cannon. So I think Francesco's in a nice position. He just needs to work out how he wants to play this, because Nicholas still has some tricks up his sleeve. So there's a lot of unknowns with the team that he has here too.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely is. It could be that Heatran in the back as well. Going to be quite difficult for Francesco to deal with. So you got to be a little bit careful here with whether that Heatran comes in. You mentioned before about it not doing too much damage to Xerneas, certainly when it's boosted up. But if the Roar comes out from that Suicune being still at full health, could be a tricky scenario if you just get your Power Herb wasted for free. So wouldn't be surprised for Francesco to maybe just go for some attacks here, whittle down Nicholas's team, and just do that little bit more damage. As damage is definitely what we see with that Grassy Glide. I can't say that tonight whatsoever, going into that Suicune.
We do, and there's the Freeze Dry that comes out, outspeeding the Xerneas, and the Moonblast going into the Suicune, not risking any Raw shenanigans and taking out the Suicune completely, forcing the Heatran to come in at this point.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what we'll be bringing in.
Exactly, and that's also going to keep the Kyurem in, being that Nicholas has already lost 2 Pokemon, so nothing going to stop that Kyurem being able to get knocked out. And it does look quite nice with that freeze dry damage onto the Rillaboom, certainly in combination with the Heatran, could be quite difficult. But yeah, is there anything that Nicholas Francesco can do about this, David?
It is looking tricky, especially as there is no boost at this point, because Kyurem is still able to do a lot of damage, and Nicholas has his Heatran in a very nice spot too. If there's potentially some dark coverage on this Incineroar that could help whittle down this Heatran's offense, then maybe there's still a game here, especially if a Geomancy is able to get up this turn as well. You'll take the Heatran's special attacking hits a lot better, and even though it's quad resisted from this Heatran, you could still do a decent chunk at +2 special attack. Maybe get some special attack drops as well with the Moonblast too. So he's definitely not out of it yet.
No, indeed. And one of the ways that he's got available to him is just to protect that Rillaboom, bring in that Incineroar, get the Intimidate off onto Nicholas's side of the field, but really unlikely in this position that it's going to make too much of a difference. Xerneas going for Protect, just making sure it's not going to take any more damage, and of course heal a little bit of damage at the end of the turn from that grassy terrain. Not sure which attacks, or Freeze Dry and a Heat Wave should have been coming out from the Heatran and the Kyurem. So Incineroar getting in for pretty much free, just taking a little bit of damage and everything recovering on Francesco's side of the field from that grassy terrain.
It is. So I think we're going into a very straightforward turn here. Fake Out plus Geomancy would be my guess. Covers for Protects on both ends. But I still think this Kyurem, which I think by now I think we've worked out is probably that Choice Scarf having outsped the Urshifu and Francesco's end, is just stuck freeze drying at this point. It can obviously freeze though, so there's still that to account for, especially on a hail team. If you're running Aurora as well, maybe you've got the Blizzard there too. I imagine Nicholas in his practice has got a few of those cheeky hails out, which has probably been very helpful for him to win in practice. But this Heatran is in the exact spot it was probably built for.
Certainly is, and Fake Out going into the Kyurem, going into that with a Moonblast as well, picking up the knockout very easily. So no Geomancy this turn. Maybe another opportunity for Francesco to launch in some that Geomancy in the next turn, as Earth Power does go for the Incineroar, does pick up the knockout. And nice play there from Francesco, just making sure he knocks out one of the big threats to his Xerneas. and just allows him to focus down on this Heatran. Rillaboom, the last Pokemon on Francesco's side of the field, does come in and is ready to go.
It is, and for the likely the most final fake out of this game as well, as Geomancy is probably able to go up this turn. It's just going to be about damage at this point now. Can Francesco's 2 Pokemon be strong? Oh, and it's the Flame Body is the choice of ability for Nicholas's Heatran, which is never normally the ability choice that you choose. But here comes the Geomancy, and now that Rillaboom is burnt.
It certainly is. It's an ability that you have to go out of your way to be able to have on Heatran being its hidden ability rather than Flash Fire, but clearly paying dividends here as the Rillaboom takes the burn for its troubles. Xerneas does get the Geomancy up, so now is at 2 stages of increased special attack, special defense, and speed. Going to be able to do as much damage as it's possible to do, and has nearly recovered itself up to full health with that grassy terrain.
It has, yeah. So it's in a nice position to be able to start dishing out damage, but I can't imagine maybe you could even go for further Geomancies here, depending on how much this Moonblast does.
Yeah, not too much damage at all. Just doing maybe not even a quarter to this Heatran. Knockoff coming out from the Rillaboom does knock off Heatran's items, so good information there for Francesco going into game 2. The damage output, though, is just a bit lacking, especially with that grassy terrain boosting up the Heatran's health, which has just left the field. So Xerneas has a lot of work cut out for it.
It does at this point, and we're yet to see the actual Flash Cannon reveal here. So it could be, we've seen Heat Wave, we've seen Earth Power. We're yet to see the Flash Cannon as to whether it's there or not. And if it's just the Heat Wave, it could get quite interesting as to whether the Xerneas gets a few special attack drops with Moonblast, because that could potentially turn it around here.
Certainly is, and we'll see if that first Moonblast does get the special attack drop, and it does not. We see another knockoff coming out from the Rillaboom, just doing a little bit more damage, and another Heat Wave, definitely going to be enough to pick up the Rillaboom and just keep that Xerneas taking just that little bit more damage. Quite impressed, I don't know about you, David, by the amount of damage that Heat Wave is doing. Going to only do more now that the Rillaboom is off the field.
It is. However, now Heatran looks like it's at least in range of 3 Moonblasts. So, and is moving first. So, and looks like a critical hit here. Oh no!
Not even a critical hit. No, Flash Cannon though going into the Xerneas, and there's the critical hit. Is going to be able to pick up the knockout, and going to be a game win for Nicholas. So Heatran doing exactly what it was designed to do and knock out the Xerneas. Of course, that was probably the only opportunity for that critical hit to come out from the Flash Cannon, though.
I think it was, yeah. That was, I've kind of really underestimated like Xerneas' damage output. I can't even speak. To a quad resisted like Pokemon like Heatran, which is also very bulky, just shows how strong Xerneas is with that Fairy Aura boost and how much special attack it has. Like, even versus a Heatran, it's still able to just really chip away and deal so much damage. But unfortunately for Francesco there, the Xerneas does go down to the critical hit from the Flash Cannon, which I don't think was going to be a knockout there because the item had gone, so there was no expert bell, no choice specs or anything like that. So for a neutral hit, I did not expect it to go down there. So, but a close game nonetheless. And we're going to go into this game 2, and I'd be interested to see how it, or if any, there is any adjustment here, because as we've seen, Francesco had a good game plan and he executed it well. It's just right down to the last turn there that it didn't go too well for him. Whereas on Nicholas's end, I think he got his Kyurem in a really nice position. He took away that Urshifu really well, which freed up his Heatrans very well as well. I think maybe a bit more damage on the Xerneas early game can really help you win that 1v1 maybe towards the end.
Yeah, certainly. And the trouble is it is only that Urshifu on Francesco's side of the field that is able to knock out that Heatran really effectively. And you saw how well that Francesco used that Urshifu in the early game. But the reveal of the Choice Scarf from Nicholas's Kyurem and being able to outspeed that Urshifu was really the big turning point. And once that was the case, the Heatran just did what it did. Could have been the other way depending on how this game goes, but certainly now we're in game 2, no longer in game 1, and Rillaboom Suicune coming out for Nicholas with Rillaboom Urshifu from Francesco. And how many switches do you expect to see this turn, David?
Yeah, we could see quite a lot here, especially how many U-turns can come out, and potentially also that U-turn on this Scarf Urshifu as well, as we're seeing. So quite a few, Ben. So the same lead for Nicholas this weekend in the Rillaboom. It worked out well for him last time. Suicune stuck around for quite a while, and if he can fish for a few more burns this time with that Scald, especially if he gets a little bit lucky this time, it could really turn around this game, especially on a Rillaboom switch in, even for the Xerneas even, just to have a little bit of chip going down so it doesn't heal off from that grassy terrain.
Yeah, indeed. And Francesco ignoring the gentleman's rule of VGC and going for a fake out on an opposing fake out Pokemon. Getting it though and stopping that Rillaboom from targeting down the Urshifu on Francesco's side of the field. He's going to be able to get a U-turn onto Rillaboom on Nicholas's side and do a significant chunk of damage and adjust from game 1 and bring that Xerneas out really quite early into the match, as we see the Suicune going for a Scald, doing a nice little chunk of damage into the Xerneas, not picking up the burn, and of course grassy terrain is going to recover Xerneas and Rillaboom.
Yep, so Francesco has his Rillaboom next to his Xerneas. However, we have seen Suicune from last game only take about 50% from a grassy terrain boosted grassy glide from Francesco's Rillaboom. So Suicune's still in a nice position, especially if it's got that roar to deny Xerneas any setup. So especially if you're Nicholas and you've got Snarl, it's probably quite a safe move to go for here. So even if Xerneas boosts up to +1 special attack, you're not too threatened, especially if you get your Rillaboom out, which is something that covers that Francesco's Rillaboom, such as that Heatran, or your Scarf Kyurem. So, and it'd be interesting to see how powerful Kyurem is based on its special attack. But we're going into the next turn, Helping Hand.
Helping Hand, and we're going to have to see how powerful that Rillaboom is, in fact, on Nicholas's side of the field. Substitute going up on the Xerneas, and maybe another failed Helping Hand attempt from Nicholas on that Rillaboom as it goes down to U-turn coming out from Francesco. So Francesco limiting the options that Nicholas has available to it, maybe thinking, Nicholas thinking that it might have been a speed tie or something like that, where he had an opportunity to just get a little bit more out of the turn. We're not going to see a Roar this turn. The Suicune did opt for Helping Hand, so that substitute going up on the Xerneas for free, and definitely gives an opportunity for Xerneas to go for a Geomancy as the Urshifu returns to the field.
It does. It's a really nice substitute. As you said, Nicholas could have been targeting that Xerneas there with a big grass move of some sort, but as you see, it does go down, and unfortunately, Nicholas doesn't get the speed interaction he wants there. Francesco did outspeed twice in a row this time, with the fake out going to the Rillaboom in turn 1, and then that turn as well. So quite an unfortunate turn of events for Nicholas's gamble there, but if it had paid off, man, that would have been pretty good. But Kyurem is coming in now and is able to threaten and potentially get rid of the substitute of the Xerneas and threaten this Urshifu. So it is in a nice position, but depending on how bulky it is, I would imagine it probably goes down to this Xerneas, this Moonblast here, because Xerneas is very strong, and if you're running Choice Scarf Kyurem, then you're probably running a lot of speed and special attack into your stats. So it's still tricky. However, if Suicune still does have that Roar, it can still bypass Xerneas' substitute and get rid of it entirely. So I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe a switch out from this Kyurem and maybe Suicune still going on the offensive with a nice Roar, but we'll see.
We shall indeed, and the Incineroar coming in for that Urshifu. So Francesco not making the same mistake as game 1, likely targeting down that Kyurem with the Xerneas. Kyurem does indeed go for that freeze dry into the Incineroar, not going to do too much damage here, and the Xerneas pops out from its substitute, is going to be able to launch the Moonblast into the Kyurem, is going to be able to pick up the knockout here. So the Kyurem is going to be going down, and it looks like that Urshifu is much, much safer than it was in the last game. Suicune, though, going for the tailwind, going to boost the speed of Nicholas's side of the field. And it's looking more and more, David, like that Suicune may not have access to Raw.
Yeah, exactly. There's been quite a few opportunities for Suicune to go to the Raw here, and we still have not seen it yet. But we still I don't think we've seen all four of its moves yet either. Francesco's playing it nice and safe, not going for that Geomancy just yet. But still, as you can see, even without the Geomancy boost, it's still pressuring a lot of damage. Now, the Heatran does come in, and we do know from game one it's Assault Vest, so it has been taking those Moonblasts quite well early on, and then obviously the Rillaboom knocked it off and took those hits a little bit worse, and making the game kind of really turning the game on its head there. So Francesco having knockoff for Heatran is probably very key here, which he still does have in the back. However, Urshifu has not been KO'd by the Kyurem, so it is a 4v2, and it's looking quite an uphill battle for Nicholas here.
Very, very uphill, and certainly one of the things that keeps it an uphill battle is that Suicune going for the Snarl. He's going to be able to bypass that substitute and still get the drop onto Xerneas because it is a sound-based move. Earth Power going into the Incineroar from this Heatran, doing a nice chunk of damage, and Incineroar, does survive on a little bit of health, so Xerneas now popping out from his substitute yet again, going for the Moonblast. Going to be going into that Suicune, doing a nice little chunk of damage, and certainly with the special attack drop isn't going to be doing as much as Francesco would have liked it to be doing. A follow-up with a Throat Chop, I believe, from that Incineroar coming out onto the Suicune, so leaving it just a little bit above half. Above half HP, and that means the double up is definitely not going to be enough to pick up this Suicune.
Yeah, I like the Throat Chop on Francesco's end there. So even if Suicune has Raw, it can no longer go for it now, at least for the next 2 turns anyway. So Xerneas is free to go for a Geomancy if it wants this turn, as Moonblast doesn't look like it will KO the Suicune going to the next. And to go for the Geomancy as well will also help it take on the Heatran's attacks a lot better too. So Francesco's setting himself up really nicely. Doesn't want to switch in that Urshifu just in case it gets bopped by a little Scald or a Heatran getting burnt. That might spell a little bit of doom there if Heatran gets going too much. So I imagine he's probably waiting for the nice switch in. And here comes the Scald. Does he get it yet? Not quite.
Not quite indeed. Incineroar just hanging on by a thread. Flash Cannon coming out from the Heatran. Both Suicune and Heatran both still in their tailwind condition, so going first on the field. And there's that Geomancy coming out from the Xerneas, going to be boosting itself back. And of course, no Snarl coming out from the Suicune this turn. So that's going to mean that this Xerneas goes back up to 1 stage of increased special attack and 2 stages of increased special events and speed. Now that's going to mean it comes in really first now between the Suicune, Heatran and Xerneas. And because that Snarl didn't come out, the Xerneas is going to be doing a lot of damage as we finish up the turn with Incineroar going for another Throat Chop, just knocking that Suicune further down its health range.
It is. And now looking towards the end game of this game here. So Xerneas is in a very nice position to just go straight for the Moonblast and kind of just check that Suicune slot as you now have the Urshifu to bring in. Interestingly, we did see now the speed reveals there that this Incineroar is slower than the Heatran. So if you had, say, like a U-turn or a parting shot, you'd be able to safely switch out with your safe pivoting move and get your Urshifu in. Because I think the only thing Nicholas can do at this point is just somehow deal with this Urshifu, and the only way to do that is get that burn on there. So if Francesco is switching that in and you're able to get that burn, then maybe we're still looking at a game, but even then Urshifu is very strong with those close combats and surging strikes. So we'll have to see if Heatran's able to. Here comes the Xerneas with its big Moonblast.
Big Moonblast going into the Suicune. Urshifu coming in for that Incineroar, feeling quite safe for Francesco to just come in, and definitely not going to be taking any damages. All of that damage is going into the Xerneas, taking it down to just below half of its health. But Heatran's got a really uphill battle here. We've got close combat, surging strikes, and of course that 1+ Moonblast to contend with.
We do, and I like the close combat option there. You don't want to go for the surging strikes because just like with Volcarona, every single hit you might get the flame body propped onto yourself. So you go to the close combat, you can get that guaranteed amount of damage first, and here it comes.
Yeah, definitely just enough to pick up the knockout. Heatran going back to its trainer, taking this set 1-1 for Francesco versus Nicholas. So it will all come down to this game 3. And I really liked the adjustment in this game where Xerneas came in a little bit earlier for Francesco and then was able to just moonblast things. It didn't need to Geomancy, it didn't need to go right for that right in the early game. So and just could do so much damage, especially being able to knock out that Kyurem was really, really valuable for Francesco. So going into game 3, David, what do you think that Nicholas can do to ensure that he comes out of this match with a win?
Yeah, it is a tricky matchup when you've got the Battle of the Restricted and Kyurem is just a hard loss to Xerneas 1v1 here. So he dealt with the Urshifu quite nicely last game, about pivoting in that Kyurem. So and I don't blame him going for the Rillaboom Suicune lead that he's gone for the last 2 games as well. I think sadly, I think for Nicholas, Francesco kind of responded to that lead by going for his own Rillaboom and Urshifu. So he was able to not lead that Incineroar. He was able to apply a lot of pressure still from the get-go. And just from the way the pivoting played out, that kind of gave him the leg up he needed to get his Xerneas into a safe position. And so once the Xerneas was in position, Kyurem was not having a nice time if it wanted to come in at all. Because the issue is you've got nothing that really threatens the Xerneas other than maybe that Heatran, and that's probably about it. Because everything else, say the Rillaboom can be intimidated, that can be shut down, and then with a Geomancy boost, you can just boost past all the special attackers. So it is a hard one, but maybe a Kyurem lead can maybe threaten us a little bit more if there is no Xerneas lead here. So which we do see. So I like the switch up from Nicholas.
Yeah, very much an aggressive early game, and certainly Kyurem does want to be on the field against both of these Pokemon that it can hit for super effective, at least with a freeze dry. And of course, Suicune on the field able to set up that Tailwind if it wants to, but I could be opting for just maybe some burns here, David, to try and get himself up a little bit further forward early doors against that Urshifu.
Yeah, I think we'd like to see that. We've had a few Scalds come out and no burns just yet, but here's 2 ripe targets to be burnt, and which could just be very nice for the Heatran in the back. It's interesting, Nicholas is kind of playing his Restricted as kind of one of the pawns in his game, really. He's able to kind of just check individual slots with a lot of speed, whereas he's kind of setting up, especially for a Xerneas team, for his Heatran endgame. So I don't imagine Francesco will just let his Urshifu go down here, but maybe Nicholas is reading into this here.
No, the Urshifus probably want to stay alive for that Heatran that's just come in for the Kyurem. Fake out coming out here on the Heatran that's now switched in, and a U-turn. So I'm sure with the Urshifu staying in, Nicholas may have been a little bit worried that the close combat was going to be coming into that Kyurem, but no such targeting, just a U-turn, pivoting out. And now it's a little bit of a difficult decision because with, as you can see on your screen there, Xerneas and Incineroar in the back, neither of those really want to be out on the field against a Heatran alongside that Rillaboom. So a bit of a better early game, I think, for Nicholas here, just being able to pivot in his Heatran and get himself on an offensive front foot a little bit earlier in the game rather than having to wait till the end for that Heatran to do work.
Yeah, I agree. Francesco, knowing the Kyurem's choice scarf, he goes for a safe double target today. He knows he's going to get something off this turn. However, Nicholas makes a great switch into the Heatran as 2 contact moves go into it. Unfortunately for Nicholas, none of them proc the Flame Body.
No, indeed. A Tailwind going up there for Suicune to round out the turn, and just that little bit of grassy terrain recovery coming out here on the field.
Exactly. So we've got the speed control does go up now, and Heatran is in the spot it definitely wants versus this Rillaboom and Xerneas. So it's going to be about Francesco pivoting in that Urshifu, which looks quite nice here. but you do risk those burn chances with a skull potentially into a slot, the heat wave potentially coming out as well. And Francesco still doesn't know the falling from this Suicune either. We've seen the Snarl, which is probably a nice option to go for too, but still potentially no Roar, and you don't have any way of stopping that either. So it's definitely on Nicholas here as to what he wants to do, because and I suspect maybe a substitute from Xerneas here, but here comes the Scald. Is there a burn?
There is a burn. The Rillaboom is going to be taking that at a flash cannon, following up from that Heatran into the Xerneas, doing a lot of damage actually. 2/3 of its health by the looks of things here. Geomancy coming straight out from that Xerneas, so is going to be going to 2 stages of increased special attack, special defense, and speed, and effectively matching that tailwind from the Suicune. But looking at the damage that came out from that Heatran, might not be able to survive a second attack from that flash cannon. A Rillaboom, though, rounding out the turn with a U-turn, pivoting out into whatever Francesco wants to bring in, and a little bit of chip damage to that Suicune. Definitely not as much as it usually would with that burn, and it is going to be the Urshifu coming out for Francesco.
Yeah, nice switch in there. So even with the tailwind, your choice Scarf Urshifu will probably outspeed Nicholas's Heatran here, depending on some of the speed investments we've seen. And we do see some speed reveals there. So the Heatran's actually slower than Nicholas's own Suicune. So likely indicating that Urshifu can probably hit this Heatran very hard before the Heatran is able to fire off its attack too. However, the Geomancy now being up, Xerneas is probably also outspeeding too. So unless the Suicune has Roar, Francesco's in a very commanding position. And so we've seen Francesco's Urshifu do a lot of damage to this Heatran. I think it got a one-shot earlier. So let's see the damage.
Indeed, and lots of damage coming out from the Moonblast onto the Suicune. Close combat follows up, is enough to pick up the Heatran, so this Xerneas is looking to be in a fantastic position. Is going to be a critical hit, but we saw in the last game that it was likely that that didn't matter. But the burn coming out, burns for everyone. Francesco's Urshifu is going to take that status condition, and it's a Snarl coming out from the Suicune here, and definitely if there was a Roar available, it definitely would have come out there. You'd expect to see. So that's Xerneas going to 1 stage of increased special attack, now down from 2. So not going to be doing quite as much damage, but I think certainly in the case of Suicune, not as much damage as usual will still be enough.
Yeah, exactly. Tailwind is still up for Nicholas, so he can bring in his Kyurem here and still outspeed a few things on the field. Probably the Xerneas, even though it's a +2 speed. Yeah, here it comes. But is it strong enough versus the +2 special defense of this Xerneas here? Yeah, unfortunately, probably no Roar on the Xerneas, but you're going to need a big hit from this Kyurem. And it's going to have to, if it's a Blizzard, it's spread damage, so that's not going to do too much. You need, I don't know, you probably need an Ice Beam, or if it does have that Flash Cannon, then that's probably your option, especially off a huge base special attack as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see a knockout if that is its choice, but Francesco is still in the driver's seat here. He can also stall out the Tailwind as well with some protects, switch out his Urshifu, get some fake out rotating coming in, because he still has all 4 of his Pokemon left. So he has a lot of resources for him into this game.
Certainly does, and Suicune just going back, and it is that Aurorus coming out onto the field. We are finally seeing it in Game 3. Nicholas with the style points here. Going to be bringing the Hail onto the field, so actually quite interesting. Going to be able to stop that grassy terrain recovering any more damage, and it is the Blizzard coming out from that Kyurem, so doing pretty good damage actually to the Urshifu. Going to have to take a close combat for its troubles, and going to be able to take it down to about 40% of its health, but not pick up the KO due to the burn there.
Yeah, so I like it. Yeah, bringing in the Aurorus. Here we go. We're going to see how much damage it does. And as you can see, yeah, the Kyurem does outspeed the Xerneas currently with the Tailwind being up. I don't know whether it would have KO'd or not, though. That's the thing. But with Grassy Terrain and Hail, it's still at the same HP as it was. But I'm not sure if I've counted my turns right, but I think Tailwind might have been up this turn. So If that's the case, Francesco's Moonblast is looking very nice into that Kyurem slot, just to completely deny any further ice type attacks from it going into this next turn. All 4 Pokemon versus Nicholas's 3. It's looking like a tough slog, and there's nothing to deny the boost on this Xerneas either. Francesco's still with the fake out in the back as well. He's got all the resources he needs at the moment, and with an Aurora's on the field too. It's weak to that grass from the Rillaboom too. And if it is that Salt Vest, which we do not normally see on Rillaboom, it's going to be able to take the ice type attacks quite well as well.
Certainly, a Moonblast into the Kyurem now that the Tailwind had indeed ended at the end of last turn. Going to be easily enough to secure the knockout, and close combat going into this Aurorus. Sadly, coming onto the field just to launch Hail on the Hail condition onto the field, but unfortunately, it is going to go straight down, even being knocked out with the burn on the Urshifu. So great position for Francesco here, and Nicholas is going to have to bring, I believe, his Rillaboom out to try and finish off the game on its own.
Yeah, it's a shame. I think Nicholas has like a really solid team, and I think there's just a little bit of weakness to Xerneas here, which I think we've probably seen if everybody's kind of been practicing quite recently. There's been a little bit of a drop of Xerneas going around, I'd say. And here we go. It faces probably Kyurem's probably worst matchup, which is really unfortunate. But yeah, the Suicune finally comes in with a little bit of health left, going out with a bang. But Nicholas, respect for bringing that Aurorus in.
Definitely so, as Suicune does go down, and it is going to be Francesco that's winning, getting the first game in this match, going to Italy. Just a really, really tough game for Nicholas to be able to get any traction. He did so well to take a game, and that flash cannon critical hit definitely came in clutch at the end of game 1, but certainly once you've revealed the Choice Scarf on that Kyurem, it's so difficult to play that kind of match where you're constantly having to pivot around the Pokemon that's really weak to your opponent's restricted and not get the most use out of it, and not be able to in turn use that Heatran to its best effect even when the Flame Body activates.
Yeah, exactly. I think if the Flame Body had activated a little bit earlier, like say when that Urshifu had U-turned out on it, if the burn had activated then, Heatran would be living just fine. If the fake out from the Rillaboom had like got into it, burnt it then, that would have been also quite nice. But unfortunately, the burns didn't quite go the way Nicholas needed it to in this matchup. But a very solid team on the whole, and I'm sure like versus a lot of other team compositions like Groudons or Kyogres, it would have been really nice. But it's a well-played set by Francesco and his Xerneas as well. So congrats to him too. So, and Italy taking their first win of the group stage where it is the pressure is ramping up. So congrats to them. And hopefully going into the rest of the weeks for Indonesia, they'll have a better time.
Certainly hope so, especially with team choices like Aurorus. But we are going to be going to a very short break now, where we'll be back for the final match of tonight's stream. We have Spain versus Hong Kong, and what promises to be another very exciting match. So stay tuned. We'll be back with you in just a moment.